Hi guys, welcome back. My name is Jaspreet and this week we will be glazing this beautiful waterfall wavy bowl or vase that we made a couple of weeks back. I will link the video where we made this in the description below, and I am really thrilled with the way this turned out. As usual, all the glazes, tools, materials, everything will be linked in the description below. Now for this project, I have used Spectrum glazes. Now Spectrum glazes are having a moment at the moment. I discovered Spectrum about 3 to 4 years back when I started right at the beginning of my clay journey, because that's one of the few brands that's actually available in Singapore. I think other than Amco, I think this is the only commercially available glazed brand that we have here. I could be wrong, but that's the only one that I'm aware of. And I have used both their Celadon, the translucent range of glazes, as well as their floating glazes. Now the glazes that we use here, these are 3 glazes that we've used on the inside basically, and these are their floating range of glazes. Now what's really interesting about these glazes is the floating range especially. They tend to melt and flow a lot, and that creates some interesting colors, some interesting hues on the texture. You apply them thick, they have a certain look. You apply them thinner, they look completely different. If you layer them, then you see something else happening. And I'll show you a close-up of the pot towards the end of the video after the glazing tutorial, so that you can see all the interesting things that I'm talking about that happen on the surface, with texture, without texture, and how the glaze flows, and what are the other hues and colors that you see on the surface. But for now, let's get started with the glazing. Okay, so here's our piece. Now this was made using a darker clay body, and after firing, once it's completely vitrified, it's going to turn even lighter. This will actually be more brown. Right now it's more pink. It's going to turn lighter brown, beigey color once it's done. At least that's what I think it will be. We'll see how it turns out. But here it is, all done. No cracks, and this is a different one because for this one I actually added a little foot ring at the base here. The one we made in the class didn't have a foot ring, but you can always add a foot ring while it's still sitting on top of the jar. You can add the foot ring right here. As usual, I'm going to first clean up the pot. I'm going to take a damp sponge, and for this I can use a regular sponge because it is already bisqued. There's no grog that's going to come onto the surface with this clay. So I just take a sponge and go over the entire piece. Okay, I think this looks good. Now the other thing that I'll do at this stage is just check all the rims and edges to make sure there are no sharp clay crumbs or anything stuck onto the surface, because after firing, after glazing, that's going to turn sharper. So make sure there's no uneven surfaces, rough surfaces. Now to glaze, I'm going to again place a bottle underneath and start on the outside and then go on the inside. I'm going to bring in my banding wheel, put a little jar of glaze here and place this on top. So the glaze I'm going to be using is soft white from Spectrum. Now this is a glaze which usually looks good on darker clay bodies as well. I mean, I hope it does look good, we'll see. So I'm going to be using this glaze, and I've just thinned it down like I usually do, and I think I thinned it down way too much. If you can see here, let me just show you. I think this is thinned down a little too much. It's almost milk consistency. It's thinner than milk, I feel. So I might do 2 full coats or maybe even a third one to get a nice even coat, because on this surface it is going to show up. The color underneath may show up. So let's start at the base here. Okay, just a quick round that has my signature as well. And then I'm going to just clean off the rim, because we don't want any glaze on the part which is going to sit on the kiln shelf. Okay, now load up my brush and start brushing on here. Now with this glaze, I'm not very, I do try and get an even coat, but I'm not as fussy as I would be with probably a Celadon glaze. Celadon glazes are the translucent glazes which show the texture very well. And those glazes can be a little funny in the sense that if they're not evenly applied, they can look a little bit patchy. This glaze thankfully doesn't look as patchy because it has a lot of movement as it fires, and you'll see this is a vertical piece. As it fires, there'll be a little bit more variation. It's a nice melty glaze, so it does a lot on its own, so I'm not too worried that I'm not getting an even coat, not with this glaze at least, and not on a vertical surface. If I was doing this like we did a couple of weeks back when we did the platter, I used the same glaze on a flat surface, which was a platter, and then my treatment was very different. I was careful about not letting the glaze pool in one area, but on a vertical surface, I'm not so stressed, I'm not so worried because it is going to move on the vertical surface, and that's something I like about this glaze, and that's the reason I use this glaze, because for its movement and all the different variations in colors that it gives. So that's my one coat done. I'm just making sure everything is nicely covered. I'm going to let this coat dry. Now obviously with brush on glazing, always wait for your coats to dry before you add the second one, because otherwise you're just pushing the glaze material around on the surface, and that's not really going to add more glaze to the pot. Cleaning the footring here while I have a chance, while I'm waiting for the glaze to dry. Okay, alright, I think that looks pretty dry to me. Let me just show you what, okay, you can actually see, yeah. So that's almost dry. I'm going to start with my second round of glaze. As usual, just load up your brush and go over the surface, your bisque surface, till your brush is nice and wet. As soon as it dries out, do not dry brush. Just lift your brush, go back into the glaze jar, load it up again, and continue brushing on. Actually, since my glaze is so thin, I'm tempted to use a third coat. I'll probably use it halfway down, not all the way, but halfway down the top of the pot. Okay, now I think we're on to the third coat. Now I'm going to just do up until this point, not going all the way to the base. But again, I'm making sure that my earlier layers are dry before I'm going in with the third coat. I think we are done now with 3 coats. I think that looks good to me. I'm going to clean up the footring here. And not just the footring, I'm going to clean not just the base but little bit of the side as well right here, so that there is some clean margin, some clean area for the glaze to melt if it does. Just a clean little edge around the footring. And I'll show you what that looks like in a second. Let me just clean this up first. Okay, I think that's good. There it is. So that's the outside done. You can see the outside is all nicely glazed. Now for the inside, this is where it's going to be more fun, I hope. So what I'm going to do is, first I'm going to take a white glaze. This is my studio white, and I know this works well with the soft white from Spectrum. So I'm going to use my studio white first to add a white base, because I want a lighter base on the inside, and then add some interest with the soft white. Though soft white does cover, I'll just show you one. So this is the thin down soft white, and you can see it does have a lot of this grey, and this is on a much lighter clay body. Now this same soft white on this clay is going to get even a little bit darker. I mean, I love the variation of this, but it's going to get a little darker. So what I'm going to do is add some white inside first, then add the soft white, and then add patches of some other colors to add a little bit more interest and, you know, those drippy things. So we'll start with studio white. I'm going to just take again number 8 Mayco number 8 fan brush and mix my glaze well. I'm mixing this well inside
and then going in, and if you have a banding wheel, this will become so much easier to do. Okay, so again we start from one side, and I'm again not going to be too worried about an even layer, uniform layer. It's nice if you can get that, I mean, don't get me wrong there, but it's okay to have some variation because that's what this design is about. And once I add soft white on top, there's no uniformity that can really stop it from doing what it wants to do. So I'm just going in with, straight strokes like this. That's it. And adding the glaze in. As soon as my brush dries out, I pull it out, load it up again, and go back in. I find it easier doing this on the banding wheel. That's one round done. Now what I'm going to do is, I can see a few spots here and there which have been missed. Just go over them, and then I'm just going to quickly get onto the rim with a little bit of glaze on the brush. I'll just go over and add some, just cover the rim where you can see the clay. Just make sure there is a coat of glaze on the rim, that's all. And it's a dabbing motion, just a quick dab, dab, dab. Okay, I think that looks good to me. Now I'm just checking to see if it's dried out. I think it has dried out, that's good. So now I'm going to go in with my soft white and add a layer of soft white. Again, I'm just mixing the glaze well so the material is not sitting at the base. Again, load up your brush and start. I am not going to go into the base with soft white because a lot of it is going to actually pool down in the base. In fact, once I do this, I'm going to just lift this and move this around because there will be a lot of pooling that will happen there. And if the glaze gets too thick in one particular area, it can lead to some other issues called crawling and some pinholing and things like that. So I'm just being careful. Wherever I see too many drips, I'm just blending it. So that's my second coat, basically first coat of soft white done. I'm gonna go in with another coat. Again, as it dries, you can see how dry my clay is, how dry this square is, the way it's soaking up all the glaze. Now I'm going to just go over the rim once to make sure the rim also has a coat of soft white. I have no idea what this is going to look like. I have this idea for what I want it to look like. But we will see. Okay. Now that is my second coat done. Now we let it dry a little bit more and we'll do some fun things with some other colorful glazes. So here's some textured mulberry. Again, I have thinned down the glaze a little bit because, like I said, it tends to get a little thick. So I'm just mixing it up nicely, and I'm using a bamboo brush for this. These are also Chinese or Japanese calligraphy brushes. They are good for glazing because they hold a lot of glaze. So I'm just mixing that in the jar. Now for this, I will have to lift my pot and be a little bit more, not careful really, but I don't want the glaze to completely drip all the way down. I want that to happen during the firing for the glazes to melt and do their thing. So just taking this, and you'll see I'm just doing a simple band. I'm not doing anything fancy. So just go in here and I'm just rotating the brush around like this. Again, not very precise. Just turning this and again going in. Yeah, I would want to avoid that. Not being uniform, that is not the objective. Being uniform is not the objective. Just be free and easy. And this is what I wanted to avoid, this drippage here at this stage. Maybe during firing all of this is going to happen. So anyway, so that's done. I'm going to go in with a quick second coat. Again, I'm not going to be very precise. I'm just going dab, 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 dab. And literally just turning the brush around like this. I'm just turning the brush around, you know, I'm not even trying to swipe or anything because I'm hoping for some melting action. I have no idea what this is going to turn out, how this is going to turn out. Okay, so that is done with one color. Now I'm going to use soft aqua and do a similar banding thing but slightly on the top. So then I'm using the same brush, dipping it in soft aqua, mixing it well. Now you can see these glazes, when you actually buy them in their jars, they will not be as thin. Just remember that you will find them quite thick. So it's just that I thin them down because they work better for me for the things that I want them to do. Okay, so if you see, it's a little bit of an overlap, and I'm just going over that band that we just made. Let's go around one more time. Again, in terms of the thickness of the glaze, I'm not being very particular. I'm just kind of dabbing along. Somewhere it's thicker, somewhere it's not so thick. So, an experiment, we shall see. Again, there's a vision for it. I have no idea that's going to happen. Okay, and now the last thing I'm going to do is on the closer to the rim, and for that I'm going to bring in soft red, I think. Right, so here's my soft red. Use the same brush, mixing my glaze well in the jar. Again, the same thing, loading up the brush, holding this in my hand, and I am now just going to go around the much closer to the rim. Again, I'm not being very particular about going all the way to the rim. That's one. Now I'm going to go on to the second coat pretty quickly. Okay, so that is done. Now I'm going to let this dry completely and then fire it to cone 5-6, about 1200 degrees Celsius, and I'll show you what this looks like after the glazing. So here's our pot after glazing. Now this was fired to cone 5-6, about 1200 degrees Celsius, and my firing takes about 12 to 13 hours. It is a slow firing, and another 25 to 30 hours to cool down. I usually do not open my kiln, especially when it has bigger pieces, until it comes down to about 50 degrees Celsius. It's ideal to let the kiln come down to the room temperature before you open it, but I think I've waited enough after 30 hours that I want to open it. Anywho, this is what the piece looks like. Let me show you a close-up here. So on the inside we used white and soft white as a base. You can see the colors and the hues right here. I think that looks amazing. They look gorgeous. I love the way that's turned out, and you can see all the interesting things that has happened. You can see the glaze being pulled down. That's because all three of them are floating glazes. They would have, you know, flowed in any case, but adding soft white to it just kind of pushed it along a little bit more. You can see where it's kind of heavier, because this is where the glaze was kind of accumulating. So this is kind of heavier. You can see a heavier band of white towards the center. Yes, I did, you know, add the signature on the inside by mistake. That happens sometimes. In any case, so you can see all the colors and the hues on the inside as well. A little bit of blue, a little bit of I'm trying to see if it's focused. Okay, a little bit of blue, a little bit of pink, a little bit of orange as well that you can see. So let me show you the sides as well, with all the pinks and the blues. I think that's a beautiful combination. It looks amazing. It has this beautiful flowy look to it. On the outside, now on the outside, if you remember, we did not add any of the pink or the blue, but there is a lot of blue, a little bit of pink here because we did add a little bit on the top, but there's a lot of blue here, and that's just soft white for you. So soft white on a darker clay body. If you see, this is the clay after firing.
During bisque, this was more red. Now after firing, this is more brown beigey color, right? Now during firing with floating glazes, especially with soft white, what I've noticed is on a darker clay body, it will have these blue, cooler hues come up. I don't mind that at all. I think that looks amazing. That looks beautiful. It adds on texture. You can see that variation. If it was a plain surface, maybe you wouldn't see as much action, as much variation in color. But because this texture, somewhere where it's thicker, obviously it's whiter. But on the texture, it does break and it interacts with the clay, and that brings out all the blues. In certain areas, it is thicker, but again, I don't mind it. And you can see we did not go all the way down, but you can see it's almost starting to come all the way to the foot. We did clean it up. That's one thing with these glazes, is that you have to be really careful on how much you add. If it's too thick, it is going to flow and come all the way down. So this is what it looks like from the outside with all those gorgeous blues. Now I'll show you the same color, soft white, on a white clay body, and you'll see how different it looks on a white clay as compared to a darker clay. Now this is again soft white, and if you look closely, you will see a little bit of that blue, but because it is on a lighter clay body. Yeah, this is the clay body that we used, and you can see a lot more blue coming out here, but you can see a little bit of that blue coming through, but not as crazy as what you see here. It's the same glaze applied almost the same way. Obviously it was slightly thinner here, but just because the color of the clay, you see two completely different looks from the same glaze. And that's what's really amazing about, I think, soft white, even pearl white for that matter. Even pearl white does a lot of interesting things. That's beautiful glaze too. So that's our video for this week. I hope you enjoyed it, and I will see you next week.